finally recording an episode of the Artenders. I am Mac. No, I'm Dan. I'm so jaded. Folks, we are, before we get down to brass tacks on why I'm so jaded, we're joined by our wonderful fellow friend from school, an actual person who is well-knowledged in music, unlike us two buffoons, Travis. Hey, Travis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us, Travis.
Hey. Thanks for having me, y'all. It's good here.
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. It's good having you.
It's an absolute pleasure. The thing is, we've had audio difficulties for the past hour or so, I call myself Mac. That's just going to be a penalty point.
Oh, that's
right
sweet
there
of
as
you.
well.
Okay, fine. I'll go get it.
But anyways, well, good luck. But point being, let's get down to brass tacks. Like I said, we are looking at Car Seat Headrest's wonderful, probably considered the best album, Twin Fantasy. It was originally came out in 2011, and then it was remastered in 2018. Had some lyrical changes, stylistic production changes as well. But from my understanding, Travis, this was and before we ask that question, Matt, can you read out what the penalty points?
Yeah. So right now
right
I'm sitting at 11, and Dan, you're sitting at 8.
And so by the end of this episode, whoever has the most penalty points has to wear a costume at one point or another. It's looking like it's going to be Mac unless I magnanimously bleep up for a duration that is extensive.
I paid Travis off so that he could help me screw Danny up. So we're gonna make sure that we get that score even by the end of the episode.
Hey, but Travis, I have a question for you, my friend. What led you? Because from my understanding, this was a selection that you had. So what led you to Car Seat Headrest's Twin Fantasy? What was it about this album that you thought was worth discussing? Because we are fools, but what knowledge can you bring us with this album right here?
So this is an album that means a lot to me personally, and we can dig into that more later once you get to know me better, listeners. But this is an album I've wanted to write about for a long time. And so different things have appealed to me about it over the years from like an intellectual perspective, I guess. When we were at SMU, summer between sophomore and junior year, I wrote a paper on Uncle Tupelo on alternative country music, which has nothing to do with this necessarily, but it did get me started thinking about music in like a academic sort of way. And that was also when Face to Face Twin Fantasy dropped, right? What did you say that was, 2018?
So the remastered version of this album came out in 2018. It sounds pretty different from the original, but like you say, it's not relevant, but trust me, it is entirely relevant for you to flex your bona fides and flex your credentials.
Fair enough. So I was writing this paper on alternative country music that I eventually presented on at a conference down in Austin. And that was a lot of fun. It got me thinking about music in specific sort of intellectual ways, and really pop or rock. And when I say pop, I mean anything that's not jazz, that's not classical, and it's not musical theater. Basically, that's what I'm gonna talk about pop music, and I'm gonna mean all of that.
I was about to ask, because you have very, very interesting perspectives on genre, so we're gonna have to loop back around to that at some point. And the way that you
was the primary thing that I was writing about at on the alternative country stuff. But that same summer, I listened to Twin Fantasy a whole bunch. It was running, this was right when this is around the same time that Mitski dropped Be the Cow. And it was a great time to be sad and online.
Right. A great time to be sad.
There was just
online.
there's so much good music about being sad. It came out when we were in school.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is an app. But also, like, that could be said, like, in regards to this album, Twin Fantasy, that for the entirety of it, it's about Will Toledo, who is the main act of Car Seat Headrest. And his exploration from his teen years of this relationship and how it's so easy to fall into that sort of teen angst, as we all like to call it, and have that be sort of contrived, but he finds a really nice way to have it not be contrived, and it's actually good music. And so It is, like you said, Travis, it is a great time to be sad at that time in 2011 and in 2018 more so.
2018, absolutely.
Yeah, the relationship that the album is about, and really considered it hardly at all. Like, I don't really think a whole lot about Will Toledo, the person, songwriter, even, and I don't think like in terms of the specific people that Will Toledo was thinking about. I don't really care what Harper's Ferry looks like. I don't really, for example, from Beach Life and Death.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Harper's Ferry, and I don't care to. There's this idea that I have come across in reading video game criticism, and watching video game criticism on YouTube. Ludonarrative. Are you guys familiar with this?
No, please pray do tell.
So it came out of video game criticism because the way we experience video games, like the art form of the capital W work,
right?
The video game, right? Varies more person to person than probably any other art form, right? Just because of the way we have to tactilely engage with it. A ludonarrative, for example, in ways I've seen described by YouTube channels like Harris Bomber Guy. He's got a great video about, is it Undertale and ludonarrative? I forget what video, but it came up talking about RPGs mostly.
Right.
The story of an RPG, like take Pokemon for instance. The story of Pokemon is not 10-year-old defeating global animal cruelty cybercrime syndicate, right?
Correct.
Right.
The story of Pokemon is your experience of the game Pokemon.
Yeah. Hence why, like, in the terms, I guess, in ludonarrative, why, for example, a lot of RPGs allows you to put your own name or just whatever name you want to put in for the character that you're playing as, or for like other members in your party. In your party. Yeah. Final Fantasy did that for the longest time, even after they introduced voice acting. I think Final Fantasy X is a really good example where everybody else in your party has a name, right? Already has a name that you can't change, and those names are performed, right? Like people say those names, but your character's name, you can put in whatever name you want to put in. So you could have like Fart Face leading the crew of Yuna and Auron,
Yeah.
Or I had a friend in elementary school who every time he played Pokemon, he would name his character You, because when you get an item, like you click up, you walk up to the Pokeball and press A, it says, like for me, it was Travis found a Pokeball. But when he would play, it would say, you found a Pokeball.
And that makes, that tracks.
And that feels like a lot more like intimate of an experience that you're having with the game.
Yeah. That, I think that Twin Fantasy, and maybe it's just because of the amount that I've listened to it, but also I think I can back this up with text from the album itself.
Oh, we love script analysis. We love text analysis, my friend.
The thing about Twin Fantasy is that the imagery in it is not super specific.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a country song, right? Think He Stopped Loving Her Today, George Jones, right? He had underlined in red every single I love you. There's these very specific details.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
But the first one that I thought of was Chance the Rapper. Chance the Rapper is weirdly specific with imagery.
But like a lot of hip hop artists are, and it makes it also tracks for
hip hop.
Yeah, and it also tracks for Car Seat Headrest, where you see throughout the album, at least in this one, I can't speak for other albums that they made, but there's a lot of influence of romantic poetry, and then so you have this like motif of like natural imagery that's constantly being incorporated with the sun, for example, like towards the latter half of the album, and then you have the reiteration of I think it's something along the lines of like your coffin's in the sand and the ocean covers it, and then
the ocean washed over your grave, the open washed open your grave.
Right.
That comes up.
And so using a lot of specificity, but in the natural imagery in order to paint those images where like it's something that doesn't exactly speak one-on-one to human experience, but you have the image in your head and it feels with vibrancy.
Let me ask you this.
Okay.
When you hear the ocean washed over your grave, the ocean washed open your grave. What ocean are you picturing? What does it look like?
I mean, I'm always, whenever, of course, I guess this is my own POV and bias that goes into it, but whenever I picture an ocean,
that's what I'm interested in.
That's fair. Whenever I picture an ocean, like, it's a beautiful beach, and like the sun is out, and it's like clear blue water and beautiful yellow white sand, but then what's really nice, at least my relationship with that lyric, is that juxtaposition of like the grave imagery, right? Where even though it's like a sad moment in a way, it is paralleled and put right next to something that is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And I think it speaks to the perspective of what maybe what Will Toledo is like going through, of like being sort of stepping back from a situation and looking at it with that light. And I think what makes this album beautiful is how that him being able to step back in the lyricism allows us, the listener, to then fit ourselves into that ludonarrative, into that role of like the performer in these songs.
And that's the point you're making, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You talked about stepping out, right? And providing a sort of, sorry, I'm not Italian, but I talk with my hands a lot, and Zoom keeps thinking I'm raising my hands.
Wait, hold on, time out. Does Zoom like
have an auto
like my hand is up?
Yeah,
function?
I just learned this.
That is fascinating. Mac, raise your hand.
Kind of terrifying.
It's not working for us.
We just look like fools now.
Yeah, Travis is a fraud, I think.
Okay, that's
what an
fine.
allegation. Go ahead.
I think a lot of this album is about that sort of detachment you were talking about,
right?
From the thing that allows him to say things like "the ocean washed your grave," "the ocean washed open your grave," or be so removed from the
experience,
from the experience, right? In the song "Bodies," right? That's and we'll come back to this when I talk about, because I want to talk about another jouissance. If I don't bring jouissance,
my God, it feels like we're getting schooled right now.
No,
and I'm loving.
If I don't bring up jouissance again in like half an hour, please remind me.
French word.
Oh, come on. You can take a stab at the spelling of jouissance.
It starts with a J.
Yeah.
It starts with a J.
Joui?
Jouissance. Maybe?
But back to Bodies. What is
Bodies? This is like his attempt at a club song, right?
Yeah.
Those are, "You've got some nice shoulders. I'd like to put my hands around them."
Yeah.
That is how he relates to the physical body, right?
Right.
And that's what's with this dog motif. Right?
I was reading briefly about this, that there's some sort of like dog motif. The cover depicts two dogs hugging.
Yeah, and there's
Travis is taking off his hat. This is serious right now.
Am I gonna say this?
Yes, you are.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Fuck it.
Fuck yeah.
This album kind of made sympathetic to furries.
Sympathetic to furries.
Whoa.
Okay.
Furries.
I'm interested in this.
Okay.
Travis, for those of you who don't know, Travis, could you explain furries?
Yeah, tell us what furries are now. Now that you've mentioned them, you tell us what furries are.
You've opened the Pandora's box in that regard.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. I brought this on myself. Furries, I would say, is a loose association of internet culture. But basically, it is the usually sexual appreciation for animalish
type. Yeah, I don't really know how you do it.
I really have to say, I'm enjoying so much how carefully you're selecting your words.
Yeah.
It's a treat to watch. This
is the most academic look at furries I've ever seen personally. You can continue.
Thank you. And typically I think this is okay to say. Not crucify me whatever. We want Barabbas, whatever, sure. But I think it's typically pretty gay.
Sure.
The furry scene.
Uh-huh.
That understanding may be colored by this album, though.
Bro, hold on. I mean, like, nothing you said, I think, is, like, untrue. But there was something about saying, and that's pretty gay. Probably could have been.
That, like, took me back. Took me back, like, 15 years.
I think there is a relationship with there's a sort of like homophobic community and the furry community. There are a lot of lines that sort of intersect with those two communities.
Is he homophobic?
Did I say homophobic?
Is it homophobic?
I'm so sorry. That's a really bad. Just give. Oh God.
But, so now you're saying
I'm trying to clean up.
Homophobes?
No, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Let's bury Danny now. Let's get him a point.
I deserve it. This is really bad. This is really
no.
bad.
But anyway, needless to say.
Look,
so you
normal, regular, straight people are not into. Right?
You're probably right. They're not going to experiment with the.
Let's give him the
fur.
opportunity at the very least.
Well, he's not saying it's exclusive. He's just saying, the average. Sure.
No, and I think part of it is because the non-traditional sort of sexual experience forces you to take a step back and reconsider all of the given systems. Right, and I think that's a lot of gay art is about that.
Yeah.
And how would you say that?
I don't
Car
know
Seat
what I'm
Headrest...
saying.
No. I think this relates. It absolutely relates. How does Car Seat Headrest do that in a way that is fresh, but also because I think that we can all agree that this is not. It's like it is aware of the fact that it is gay, but it's not like necessarily gay art.
Well, it's just part of the given circumstance.
But yeah, exactly. But I'm interested. How does
accurate.
You know what I mean? I know the given circumstance. You like that? You like that? No,
I do. I love you guys.
Oh, great. Love you too. Now, what were you saying about the how is this? How does this compare to a lot of gay art?
It didn't take long to get back to jouissance.
Okay.
Here we are.
So jouissance
Here we are.
We're back. So jouissance is a term that in music was in musicology was coined by a guy named Robert Fink, who's he's a teacher at he's a professor at UCLA. He's written a few books with Walmark, who was my advisor at the University of Oregon.
Oh wow.
And he has this take that there are two main camps, two main ways that music can be organized.
Okay.
There is teleological music, right, goal-oriented music. Think Beethoven 5 starting in a minor key and ending in a major key.
And that is like a specific choice for a specific story.
There is one programmatic music that is teleological, right? Music that like operas generally. What is it? Is it Tristan?
Sure.
Tristan?
The
Tristan Thompson.
The Wagner opera.
Oh yes, it is.
It's just one long delayed cadence that just keeps unfolding, and it doesn't resolve itself musically until the plot resolves itself.
Yes, right.
That is teleological music. That is goal-oriented music. That's the kind of music made in Europe by Christians generally.
Oh, interesting.
And by straight people generally.
Oh, okay, sure.
And then we have the opposing end.
And we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back around. Okay. So Christianity is
oh my God. Time out. I gotta stop. No.
We're just talking about Europe. We're just talking about Europe.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's funny how we're just like with one album, it feels like we're covering all sorts of like different bases.
We will. This is what I promised, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. That's why you're here. And in this way, I so hope that this is not. I so hope that this is not the only episode that we have with Travis Carroll, because like to have you as like a resident musicologist is just like exactly what the doctor ordered. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
What the doctor ordered.
So Christians
prescribed.
So So Christianity,
Yeah.
one day Jesus shall come back, and he shall judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. Right? This is all future tense. We're gonna get there someday. Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away. Right?
Oh,
There is
nice
there
on
is
the I'll
something
fly away.
there is something later.
Yeah.
There is a point in time. There is a climax to the music. There is a climax to this story of God, and there is a climax. There is a singular climax in the way that straight people have sex.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Now let's think about places. Let's think about cultures with really repetitive musics.
You're making so much sense. Okay, yeah.
Are you guys familiar with gamelan music at all?
No.
From Indonesia? No. It's like all the musicology people are really. It's like why we know about it is because some French dudes in the 1800s thought it was cool, and we're not allowed to like music by non-white people in the academy unless a more important white person liked it before us.
Oh my gosh. I totally believe that.
The French impressionist composers really liked this music and the way that the rhythms interlocked and that things repeated themselves. It's hyper repetitive, almost trance-like music coming from a part of the world where religions generally accept some form of reincarnation, right? Buddhism gets it from Hinduism. There's other forms of animism around. It's not a teleological religion. Buddhism kind of is because of there is some sense of like achieving nirvana, right? There is some place you could get to, but
for sure,
generally people accept the cyclical nature. The music is similarly repetitive. Where else is music repetitive? Disco. Disco is very repetitive. Disco is very gay.
Oh, interesting.
The blues, also African music, generally repetitive. I was about to say, generally comes from religions that are less teleological than Christianity. I think that what this album does with and that repetitiveness, that sustained ecstasy that you would get from like disco or gamelan music or even like EDM.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I think that that Twin Fam, that's jouissance.
Oh.
That sustained ecstasy is the term that's what Fink calls jouissance.
Now is jouissance traditionally a music term, or is that
something that transcended?
I think it's like a psychology or something.
It sounds like it would
not. It's not a term you hear a whole lot.
But in terms of the relation of jouissance to bodies and it being a disco, infectious song and
right, it's a club
also
song.
jouissance, just like how it relates to the rest of the album as well, and it's there is that sort of like ecstasy that is consistently delivered.
And
it feels like there are some downbeats, like in the second song repeatedly, Beach Life and Death. Like there may be some like downbeats here and there, or
what can you describe what you mean by downbeats, because that means something specific in music that doesn't mean the same thing.
Oh, sure.
Right,
Sorry,
right,
my
right.
bad. Not literally downbeats in terms of the music
Right.
sense. I mean downbeats in the imagery sense of jouissance is what I'm trying to.
I see.
Are
But,
there
like,
any
down
synonyms
is
that you could use for
like
downbeat?
down is in like lower energy.
Yeah, and so or like
okay.
or
You mean
very
beat as
different
in measurement of?
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
scene,
And I meant
yet
like
again actor.
and I meant
love
like
it.
difference in energy, and even
Yeah.
like leading after
Yeah.
Beach Life and Death with Stop Smoking. Like Stop Smoking doesn't have that same sort of ecstasy as Beach Life and Death does. I mean, it also is, exacerbated by the fact that Beach Life and Death is like a 10-minute song, and Stop Smoking is, I think, the one of, if not like the shortest song on the album, right? And so it's that like that sustained pressure, but then it's like a moment of relief, and then like turning it back. I am so bad tonight.
It's okay.
I'm so bad tonight.
You know what it's like?
What?
You know what it's like? It's like leaving a party to go smoke a cigarette.
Okay, I need an explanation for that. Can we get an explanation for that after a word from our sponsor?
So Beach Life and Death. Are we going to get copyrighted
If we use a little bit of
if I play any of the music on my phone?
I would not do
Because I
that.
need to just refresh
Well,
myself.
No, go ahead.
If you were to do that, if you could mute yourself while you're doing that and sort of like give us a visual
pretty.
gesture.
Or say something pretty.
Oh, you know how we always
Absolutely.
do, but during the break in which we should have been recording. But what were you gonna say? Because I can see that your mouth is agape.
Oh, sorry.
Like
It's
a
Yeah, no.
pigeon, eating its food.
The main reason that because I was Travis was telling me about how what we would talk about if he was to come back on the show again, and the main reason that I am so interested in having Travis as a recurring guest of ours is because the way that he's talking about music right now reminds me a lot of the way that we talk about all the stuff that we review. That's more in our wheelhouse. You know what I mean? And that is kind of comforting, but also is just very exciting.
Well,
you know?
I mean, and it goes to show how not experienced we are, at least in terms of the study that is music,
Absolutely.
right? Like, we both love listening to music, of course, and we both have been influenced by music dramatically
and we've
throughout
reviewed
our
music on the
lives.
show.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's nice to have somebody who can actually flex their bona fides and have us.
Bona fides?
I know
Is
what
that
I
a
said.
real word?
No, and have us like sit down and really examine it's the art in the work of it, right? Like, we
right.
are just appreciating the art as like we're playing the results,
Right.
essentially. But
And because Travis asked me to, I think while listening to it, I realized, oh wait, I should be looking at this at with my credentials, not just as like a passive listener. Because because Travis was like, I want to get your take as performers.
well, but that's a big thing that we always take into account when it comes to reviewing the albums that we've had.
Right.
The best example that I can think of is like Taylor Swift's Folklore, and part of it too. But it's the presentation and it's the humanity that I am invested in.
Yeah.
Right. I can't tell you bleep about like what goes into the meter or just any sort of music term. I cannot provide.
But the theatricals of Taylor Swift were pretty impressive.
Exactly.
That's true.
Okay. That's a big thing that I'm influenced
So
by.
what did you latch onto in Twin Fantasy? What did you guys like or note about this album? I'm curious as to your relationship with it. What is your Twin Fantasy Ludo narrative like?
Sure. So from whenever I was listening to it, the thing that was difficult for me at first is that it felt like the lyrics were a lot more important than I was giving them credit for. Like I was
Isn't that always the case though?
It's true, yeah. Like I always
there's always a level of thought and like carefulness when it comes to incorporating lyrics into a song. I would say regardless of what song, except for like a song by, I don't know, LMFAO or something, right? Like,
hey,
but even then,
don't you dare besmirch the name of LMFAO.
We're okay. You can't see, and Travis can't see it either. But we're both standing next to a cardboard cutout of sitting next to a cardboard cutout of Pitbull. So
That's
like,
true.
who are we?
Yeah, who are we to say?
To say?
But the thing that hit me over the head is, oh wait, I really need to be listening to the lyrics a little bit more. And I think that after looking up the lyrics, it was interesting to find that, yes, the lyrics are actually a huge factor in the music. And we've been talking mostly this episode so far about the imagery and the lyrics and whatnot of the music. And so it's difficult for me to really latch onto that at first and allow myself to be swept away by that. The very first one that really hit me was
Don't look at
sober to death, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. That one was the very first one that I.
That's
As we're holding our breaths.
That's Take My Hands Off Your Neck. That's
Correct. Yeah.
Hold on to the ghost of my body. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I want to comment on that
Love
song
that.
because that's
that's the first one that actually like hit me, and I was like, okay, I get what each song is trying to do, or what he is trying to do with this album in terms of like the emotional response that I'm supposed to have. That was the very first time that I was like, oh, I understand what your intention is here.
Well,
And
what's interesting
it
in
made the rest of the album
regards
easier.
what's interesting in regards to that is Toledo has said on either an AMA on Reddit or maybe like a post on Tumblr or something, but he is quoted in saying more or less that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he actually finds most of the song toxic, and he doesn't really like the song anymore, and he
That
finds it a
specific
little bit
song?
more problematic. Correct,
Yeah.
and he alludes it to where, in a movie there may be like a murder or something, right? And regardless of whether that murder is painted in a good or a bad light, it's still murder, right? And that's his relationship with the song right now, except for the ending of the song, which he still likes. So I don't know. I find it really fascinating.
How
For
does it
me,
end?
That's a great question. It's escaping me right now, but it's that sort of repetition.
I got something.
You got something?
I got
What do
something,
you
but
have?
yeah. Look that up real quick.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and the other big thing was that
Were you not ready to filibuster?
yeah, sorry. So you're talking about how you're talking about the that specific song, and also like the changes that he made between the last time that he took a swing at
But
this.
it's
in
growth
2011
changes as well.
and 2018. But the thing that I noticed specifically is just how many tools he uses. How I started thinking about it is more like there's a lot of music that feels like directing, in that the genre that they are writing, or that they have decided, the identity that they have decided to adhere by, already tells them so much about the music that they're going to write, that their tool bag is very limited, and they just use like the tools that they already know they have. You know what I mean? And this was so interesting to me because it felt like writing more than directing, in that he was the one that was constantly dictating what his tools were going to be. He used so many different means of storytelling.
Yeah, okay.
That was kind of jarring at first, but that I eventually allowed myself to just kind of be swept away by.
Yeah. So we've got two totally different genres, or subgenres back to back. Sober to, with really these four songs, right? Stop Smoking, We Love You, and Sober to Death are both kind of like folk rockish, right?
Yeah.
You could play those on an acoustic guitar and get the gist.
Yeah.
Nervous Young Inhumans, Bodies are both like dance punk songs, right? They sound more like early Arctic Monkeys, LCD Sound System, early Strokes, right? It sounds like New York almost. This kind of like very dancey punk rock. There's jouissance, lots of jouissance, right?
Right.
Right.
I love that.
We're back into Cute Thing, which is also a very big acoustic guitar song. There's one moment where there's a huge so if I'm playing, and this is maybe not the right key, but let's say I'm playing right, I'm just playing chords in G major.
Right.
There's this big dominant 7 chord.
Yeah.
Right? You hear that?
Yep.
That's a tritone? No.
Yes. No?
No?
That's the tritone.
What?
Nothing. It was just like, we're like two kids just like looking up at dad, and we're just like, oh my God, how does he do it?
I'm with him. Speak for yourself. Sorry, go ahead.
So there's this, so we've got this big chord that's super unstable. It's got what's called a tritone in it. It's the most dissonant interval. It doesn't matter why. Yeah, can you teach elementary school? I have to say, it doesn't matter why.
It doesn't matter. I know. You have to remind us.
Anyway,
please don't ask me.
There's a moment in Cute Thing. It's the most like, here we go. We're going home. We're back in the home key.
Yeah.
Like huge, big folk rock, dominant 7 chord that sends us back into the we're getting older. We're back into this folk rock thing, into really the rest of the album, until it gets really weird on Famous Prophets and The Last Twin Fantasy, where it's like it takes us to church, kind of, you know?
Right.
This album ends with church organ sounding.
It does.
Yeah.
And almost like a sermon.
In a way, and then there's a good amount of like biblical allusions and references that
do you guys
peek its way into it.
The two subtitles for the two versions of the album, Mirror to Mirror and Face to Face?
Oh yeah.
That's from Paul. For now we see as in a mirror dimly, and then we shall see face to face.
Did you go to Catholic high school, or did you go to Catholic high school?
I did, but I actually learned that we didn't read the Bible in Catholic school because we're
Whoa.
Catholic. I learned that at Methodist school.
You're killing me. Oh, because you were also was it philosophy or theology that you were a minor in?
I came kind of close to a religion minor. I took so what happened was I took the history of the New Testament course, and I thought that counted for my religion minor or my religion credit.
Yeah,
and it didn't.
How not?
Because it was like, I don't know, but I had to.
The
take
New Testament's not real, obviously,
Anyways,
man.
my advisor said, no, you have to take a different religion class. And I said, okay, can I take Catholic literature? So I took two pretty advanced, or at least the Catholic lit class was pretty advanced. But yeah, I read a lot about God in college.
And now we're here talking about jouissance.
And so you said that Toledo said he likes the end of the song.
Yes. So
don't worry, you and me won't be alone no more.
And that is repeated continually throughout the outro, correct?
Yeah, and that's to me what this like. I don't agree with Toledo's take that Sober to Death is a problematic song. Like, it's about problematic things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's about being a miserable piece of shit, basically.
Yeah.
Most of the album is about that though. Right. But in microcosm, in Sober to Death, we get we were wrecks before we crashed into each other. Your Hoffman can hold on to the ghost of my body. This man is going through hell, right?
Yeah.
He is living the dark night of the soul. It is a vision of beyond this, right? I hesitate to use the word heaven, but
right.
The end of the album does tend to make me think of it that way.
Yeah.
We have hell and we have the salvation from it. Yeah, question.
I also want to say thank you, Mr. Carroll. Thank you for calling me. I really appreciate it. But on the note that is like how the album leaves you is a interesting tidbit that in the vinyl edition of this album there is a locked groove for the final song, meaning like instead of like the needle just like exiting, I guess, the record, it stays on the record so you can play your own little loop, essentially, have that be part of the record. And so this locked groove kind of, I don't know what it sounds like, obviously, because I don't have this record on vinyl, but I guess the idea behind it is like this fantasy can live on forever, or like you being sent to heaven, or just like there's something to do with this tangible quality of like this can be you or this can be forever. There's something in regards to the fantasy that is being portrayed through this album, or at least that is how I interpret the implementation of this locked groove.
And I do want to come back to that in a second, but what were we going to say, Travis?
I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that. And to me, that's the connection between these two different things, right? The jouissance and the ludonarrative. Is that end of the album, or is that the fact that this album is both like it has moments of jouissance and moments of teleology, right? Super interesting to me. But the end of this album, this sermon, right? Basically, it's a vision of me and you that can exist outside of everything else. And if it is just a fantasy, then anything can happen from here. The contract is up. The names have been changed.
Yep.
Right. So he's explicitly telling us to make this about our own relationship with the album. He's telling us to exploit this relationship with the record as like the important thing, right? These are only lyrics now, right? This is not my friend or this is not my ex-lover. These are lyrics.
Yeah. But that's something that is transcended in the 2018 version of this album, as opposed to the 2011, where he did use like a name in the 2011 version. And so you were asking, yes, I forgot the name, but like it's like Cat something. But point being, like he used someone's name in the original lyrics in at least one of the songs, and said like specifically that was like an addendum essentially in the 2018 edition, if we can call it that, where it's like no, now this is transcending. This isn't just me. This can be anybody.
And
right?
and this is reckless speculation purely, but does Do we think that is because of the audience response?
No, well, I think more so. I think it has to do with
him growing as an artist.
I think it's him growing as an artist, and that's the thing that actually attracts me most about this album is that like it's in many ways the same album. And I didn't listen to the entirety of the 2011 version. I listened to the 2018 version. But that's what enchanted me so much about it is that like the consistent differences throughout it. There's one thing that really stuck out to me and embraced the growth of an artist is that there's a line in Cute Thing. The original line in 2011 was, and I'm probably going to mispronounce these names, "Give me Dan Bejar's voice and John S. Whistle's stage presence." And then in the 2018 version, he changed that to Frank Ocean and James Brown.
Yeah.
And so like that's him acknowledging himself as an artist and then him revisiting this album and remastering this album. That's not only him growing as an artist, but that's him growing as a human being. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I actually kind of wish that's something that more artists would do. Like actually go back and revisit previous material and revisit previous experiences. And I think that is just so fascinating about this, that even though it's the same album, it's different and it's a different experience, even though it's recounting the same one. And I am just allured by that concept.
Yeah, well, also that it's interesting because we see that so often in other modes and mediums, like people going back and revamping things, recontextualizing things, remakes of movies. You see, I mean, fucking Shakespeare, like how many people have like recontextualized or even rewritten some of Shakespeare, or that's just so common, but you don't see that all the time in music.
Yeah.
People do covers, but it's...
Or like doing it in concert, right? I guess is like the transcendence
most of the time,
of it.
covers don't really have to do with the time. And most of the time, covers have to do with like personal preference.
Yeah,
you know
and
what I
this
mean?
isn't necessarily like remixing either.
Right,
this
exactly.
is remastering.
Right.
This is like I'm
This is
having another
beyond
go at it.
remastering. So remastering, usually you take the recordings and maybe you overdubb just the volumes of everything that is already there. Maybe you put it in stereo, but you use the original tapes, the original recordings. This is, to me, this is more than a remaster. This is a revision. I would honestly, I consider the experience of listening to each of these albums so radically different that I just consider them different albums.
Yeah. That's a fair thing. Yeah.
I listened to Mirror to Mirror once, and I was like, this is homework. You know, it's
yeah, right. That's good.
I don't have the same, like, I went through a really bad breakup junior year of college. I listened to Mirror to Mirror. No, I listened to Face to Face almost every day for like 6 months. And I have just fallen absolutely in love with these specific recordings of these songs, right? I think the Frank Ocean and James Brown thing is hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm off-put by the shorter versions of Beach Life and Death and Famous Prophet Stars. You know, to me, the overwhelmingness of these recordings is so integral to my experience of them.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I just can't put this album on in the car on the way to work.
Right.
Right.
That's
because it takes so much out of me.
Yes, I had the exact same experience. That it was difficult for me to listen to it in the car. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you listen? Where and when? What's your typical listening to this album like on average?
Sure. Most of the most music that I listen to is done in the car, like because I spend so much time in the car, and I tried to listen to this in the car, just like on like not a road trip, but like in between Dallas and Fort Worth. It was about an hour drive, and like the length of the album pretty much, and that I quickly realized was not the way I should be listening to it. I think I got like maybe 2 songs in and was like, oh, this does not work. And purely because it requires an amount of focus that I could not give it while driving. Like usually I use like driving music as like a zone out type thing, and I couldn't because there was so much that was being asked of me. I love the way that you said homework. Yeah. What about you?
What's funny is that I just listened to it at my computer, and I was just like looking at the lyrics, throughout like listening to it, so I could really embrace myself more with the lyrics. Because typically when I listen to a song the first time, I'm really not paying attention to the lyrics at all, unless it's like sometimes like a hip hop song and it really feels like the focus is like the lyrics, or like there's like a turning point with the lyrics. Like a really good example to me for some reason that's popping out of my head is like Atmosphere's Yesterday. I think it's a really good example.
I love
but
that
it's like
song.
how the lyrics are constructed in that is like you can't help but listen to those lyrics, and I don't think this is a detriment. This is just stylistically what's going on. That's not. I don't feel like the lyricism is the focal point when listening to this album. So if I were to listen to it like I listen to other music typically, I would have not paid attention to the lyrics in this. Now, I think what's interesting is that typically I do just kind of shuffle through songs, right? Even when I discover an album for the first time, I don't play through beginning to end from the album. I just shuffle it, and I think that's what a lot of people do nowadays. And I guess like I want to ask you, Travis, that do you think it's like a sort of dying art maybe? And I'm probably being prisoner of the moment right now. Actually, I think I am. But do you think it's like a dying art of like the crafted nature of ordering an album and like the storytelling of an album?
I've been seeing think pieces with this basic premise for almost 10 years now, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the form is dying. I think the only people who are still doing it are the people who wanted to do it in the first place, right? For a lot of people, like if The Weeknd put out an album 10 years ago on a CD, right?
Yeah.
He would need to pick the order of his songs. But The Weeknd does not make records that are designed to be listened to in order, right? So for him, I don't think it makes a difference whether you listen, shuffle, or straight through, because he probably just shuffled the files in his computer, used a dartboard,
and maybe
I don't think it's
like
necessarily a sin.
And not to be disingenuous, like maybe he does do that, but like probably just like it's safe to say that there are at least some artists that, you know, are doing the example that you are doing.
Yeah, protect your integrity. I don't care. I don't care if people.
Travis attacking The Weeknd for whatever reason.
He said, "No, let's just rip
I'm
The
just
Weeknd."
not crazy about it. I just whatever. Like I could have picked anybody. Right?
Yeah, true. Right.
What point?
Just about when an artist does now put an album in an order that it matters what order you listen to. Like takes track listing seriously, basically.
Yeah.
I just think it's so much more powerful these days,
right,
to do that, because when you think about like some of the to me, two of the greatest opening moments of an album are Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, starting with the harmonica and piano on Thunder Road, or on his next album, Darkness on the Edge of Town, Badlands starts with a and what he's doing in those is he's kind of, no one's heard that song before, no one's looked up just like he's crafting the tone of the album because he has to, and it works great, and I think he takes tracking very seriously. But I think when you do like Twin Fantasy and you start with something more down, right, something a little bit more almost folkish and like not necessarily representative of the album, I think it invites you in for a journey rather than like track listing in the LP era. I think maybe had to telegraph more of things that came later, right? That you could have more variety, because we're used to listening to music on playlists with different genres mashed up right next to each other. You can do that with album tracking now in a way that you couldn't maybe in the LP or CD era.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Could we continue this conversation in just one moment? I'm gonna restart the camera.
Whoa.
But before we continue on the 20 fantasy conversation, I just wanted to give you the floor a little bit, like we haven't been already. Giving you the floor a little bit on I love you, man. On where like what are your credentials? Where are you from? A little bit, right? Where are you from? You are currently in the process of getting your master's in
I'm
musicology.
not.
Oh, not anymore.
I'm I am
You're in hiatus, correct?
I I'm on hiatus
Uh
from my
huh.
master's
Uh huh.
indefinitely. Um right now I am teaching guitar and elementary music and as much musicology as I can.
Yeah.
Um
Right.
musicology teaching is usually places like this or whenever I can sneak some lower level stuff through school. Um
Yeah.
but yeah, so I wrote a few music history papers. I came as close to a music history degrees they would let me at SMU write a BA, and I took all music electives were music history classes,
Uh huh.
taught by guys like Kim Corbett, Zach Walmark, and Peter Kupfer. Uh, great teachers. Um, and Zach Walmark was my freshman intro to musicology teacher at SMU, and then took a job in his home state of Oregon. He uh, got his master's and wrote a whole bunch. I wrote a whole bunch under his uh, tutelage, I guess, about bands like the Velvet Underground. I wrote about who else? I wrote about Mitski. I wrote about Kanye West. I wrote some stuff about like Renaissance music. I was doing.
That's
I was
awesome.
just running the gamut, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and what I found was that there's really two camps. There's the musicology of classical music, and then there's ethnomusicology. Ethnomusicology generally and not officially is the music of poor people and the music of non-white people.
Gotcha.
Um, is the study of that music. There are some methodological differences. You can do ethnomusicology on European music. It's not done generally. I was more interested in ethnomusicology, but mostly just because of the subject matter, right? I'm big into the form, right? I'm big into textual analysis,
Yeah.
working with the autonomous work itself, right? Like I was saying before.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of that with the kinds of music I like. There's not a whole lot of serious engagement with the text of lyrics, for example.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of engagement with, and this is huge for me as someone who casually collects records, with like the physical art object of
Yes.
a record.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not just it's what you're touching, and it's your emotional state the first time you heard a song, you know? Right. And it's the Ludo narrative for all music, I think, but especially for Twin Fantasy, because there's so much repetition, right? We've talked about the ocean washed over your grave, the ocean washed open your grave. You and me won't be alone no more. And then other stuff comes back as well. Stop smoking or keep smoking.
Uh-huh.
There are lots of places where either you're hearing the same thing over again, you're not getting any new information that you're processing. So you do start to get introspective, right? It's like chanting the Hare Krishna or saying your Hail Marys, right? It's this sort of trance-like repetitive thing that happens that allows you to explore your own feelings in the midst of this 16-minute famous prophets,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And then it brings you to these sustained highs and then lets you reflect on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we were talking about before the break, going from Beach Life and Death to going from Beach Life and Death to Stop Smoking to Sober to Death, right?
Yeah.
It's like going to a party, getting really overwhelmed, stepping out to relax, stop smoking, we love you, why are you smoking a cigarette?
Yeah. Right.
And then you're back in the party and things are different and not as good anymore as they were when you left.
Yeah, right.
But also, maybe they're just not as fun because Beach Life and Death is pretty dark too.
Yeah, right.
And then Nervous Young and Humans is finally we are coping, right?
Uh-huh.
Bodies, I would say, is probably so much, you get so much time to reflect, I think, in Famous Prophet Stars, and then you're brought back for a final, right, or like with this at the end of Twin Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's the back to the track listing. The Ludo narrative only work. The emotional response only happens, not only, but a large part of the reason that the emotional response happens the way it does is because of the order that this album is in. You couldn't put Bodies last on this album; it wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
That makes sense. So you would say that your big call to action, like your mission statement, if there was to be one, is that you wish, from your perspective as a musicologist, that that you wish that the resources and time and effort and attention to detail that has been offered to like general, very popularized musicology, widespread musicology, was given to this ethnomusicology that you find so interesting, and that is your big qualm with the musicology world.
For the most part, I will say though, there is lots of robust scholarship in the musicology world, but science feeling anthropology based than dealing with like serious art criticism. We don't, it almost feels like, oh well, Beethoven can handle serious criticism,
right?
But poor people's music can't handle it, and Black people's music can't handle it, right? We're not going to engage seriously with whether or not these texts accomplish the goals they set out to accomplish. We're just going to talk about how they exist in a societal sort of way,
right?
That's most of ethnomusicology. From my experience, there are great ethnomusicologists out there, but the methodology of ethnomusicology does not jive with the kind of writing I want to do about rock and roll.
Yeah,
generally.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That tracks. That tracks. So, Mr. Carroll, Professor Carroll, now that we are coming to the end of our Twin Fantasy journey, sir, what is your biggest takeaway? I guess the best way to say it would be, what would be your biggest steal in terms of, if you were going to make something after having listened to this album, what has it taught you? What would you steal? What would it inspire you to change about the way that you view your art making?
I don't write a whole lot of songs these days, but I do sing a lot. Will Toledo a lot about this, but Will Toledo's vocal technique and his comfort with ugliness. This is also a trope of gay art, is the beauty in the ugly, is just so powerful to me.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
like
very
his screams
true.
are not technically not. He sounds like his vocal cords are like actually being damaged by it. Like if I could spend a whole lot of time, I could quit doing everything else with my life and just write songs all the time. And eventually I might, I certainly am long enough to write something like Famous Prophet Stars. I'm sure that I would like eventually find some comfort in his, or some newfound appreciation for his comfort with repetition of words, particularly the way that he uses, like on the other album, the one with Drunk Drivers, Killer Whales, there's a part where it goes, drugs are better with friends, are better with drugs, are better with friends, are better with, I forget the word for that, but when you have a sentence that loops around on itself, he's really good at that. There's a few moments of that. He's got some nice lyrical tricks that I would eventually try to implement, but it's also really intricate while staying ugly.
Yeah,
it's still got that kind of lo-fi aesthetic from the roots of it from the 2011 version. But the way that he's able to use that grit but keep the album intricate
That is absolutely inspiring. I completely agree, and I'd probably take very similar things. Danny, what are your final thoughts?
This style of music is not typically something that I listen to. I'm not the biggest person into the indie pop / rock / folk inspired, sort of all those genres blended together. That's not typically my cup of tea. However, what I did really enjoy about this album was the emotional exploration that it went on, as well as I have personally not seen. It's not common, rather. I have seen it a couple of times, but it's not common for somebody to specifically revisit material and then give it a fresh breath of air. I think that's something that's an absolute treat, and I did end up enjoying this album, which is nice, of course. And once again, I really enjoyed the journey that let's just say the character goes on throughout this album, and the ability to transplant one's emotional experiences onto the experiences of the character in the album. I think is really, really sweet, as well as it's sort of enlightened me of, oh my god, I do not listen to or watch or experience enough homosexual art, and that is something that, in terms of the consumption that I do, is a blind spot for me, and I'm happy that this album sort of alerted me to those blind spots. Is the essence of my experience, I would say.
Yeah, sure. I echoed the things both of you guys just said. And that's that. That's my whole review. No, I'm kidding. It was great. It was a fantastic album, and thank you so much, seriously, Travis, for
thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for allowing us to listen to it, as well as or recommending for us to listen to it, not allowing us to listen to it, as well as letting us talk to you and get your perspective on the podcast, man. This has been so fucking educational. I learned so much. I'm so excited about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trev.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. This is so much fun. Let me know anytime you need somebody to come talk about a record.
Let me tell you, we will. We absolutely will, Travis Carroll. And
awesome.
Last thing, Danny. Actually, before I just want to make sure, because we have a tradition on the show that every single time we have someone on the show, we get their perspective on this. You're a Houston Astros fan, correct?
I am.
Does that mean you're also a Houston Rockets fan?
Are you trying to ask a Houston Rockets question right now?
I'm trying to ask a Houston sports question.
No, okay, no, I got it then. Why don't you give me the domain?
Astros,
Travis, is baseball coming back?
I am less and less hopeful every day.
And that's the answer. There we go. Thank you for fulfilling the tradition of the show.
Thank you for ending us on a sour note.
And
I did see that Rob Manfred. Never mind. I'm not going to say anything, because whatever we publish that I have to say about Rob Manfred will land me in a lot of trouble.
Well said.
He's the worst.
Daniel Lavelle, what are we consuming next?
Cowboy Bebop the movie.
Fuck yeah, we are. All right, there it is.
Folks, we have finally reached the end of episode 59, where we get to tally up the penalty points that have occurred throughout episodes 50 through 59. It has been a heck of a journey. It's crazy to think that we've already done 10 episodes since we officially started the penalty point system, and goddamn, I'm glad I did, because even though I ended up with 8 points in the end...
And remember, I was in the lead the entire time.
For a good portion, yes. Mac, funnily enough, got 11 points. A big thing that was bringing you back, Mac, was the fact that Camera died 2 different episodes.
In a row.
That's right. It was killing us, but it killed you more. And because Mac has incurred more penalty points at the end of this episode, we get to go to Party City or whatever sort of location that has costumes, and he's going to wear a costume of sort
of your choosing.
I mean, and like you have to agree to it as well. I can't like put you in like
That's sweet.
a French maid's outfit if like you don't want to, or like if
that's
you're
nice of you.
vehemently against it.
Sure,
you
but
know?
it has to be. It definitely has to be a punishment.
Yes,
Sure,
of
okay.
some variety of
Okay.
some kind. And so, regardless, sometime throughout the course, maybe somewhere between episodes 60 through 69, nice, Mac will be wearing a costume for at least one of those. No, I shouldn't say at least, but for a
For an episode.
For
Yeah,
an episode,
for an episode.
of that. I know, like,
Oh.
this doesn't include, tier lists or anything like that.
Yeah.
Tier lists don't really count as, episodes
Right.
or anything like that. But nevertheless, still editing that. Point being, Mac, you have to wear a costume. How are you feeling, by the way?
Bad. Yeah, this is going to ruin my week. This is the thing. Is that I know that I have students. I teach children. And if one single one of those children gets a hold of me in whatever costume that we're doing, those children are never going to let me live that down. And that's what I have to live with.
It's your fault.